Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Coast News. And as always, we've got some amazing news from different theme parks, rides, attractions and events all over the world. So let's get straight into the news today. Our top story for tonight, Alton Towers have officially announced their Scarefest lineup for 2023. Now, obviously, usually by this time of year, this sort of month, is the first day of September, and this would mean that around this time, theme parks start preparing for Halloween events. Obviously, and this doesn't. There's no exception in the UK. Like Fright Nights and Chessington Halloween and Alton Towers Scarefest as well. Now, obviously, over the last couple of years, Alton Towers' Scarefest lineup has been very stale and quite a poor lineup, to be honest. Now, obviously, it wasn't always like this, to be honest. The Scarefest, Alton Towers used to be apparently one of the best Halloween events in the UK. Even used to compete with Fright Nights over at Thorpe Park, which has gotten really good over the last couple of years, I must say. But obviously, even like last year, even like the last couple of years, and like Alton Towers used to have such a wide variety of scare attractions for their Scarefest lineup. They used to introduce new mazes each year, and used to have like other experiences such as scare zones and things like that. But over the last couple of years, Alton Towers have just rehashed the same sort of scare maze lineup each year, with the main ones that kept bringing back being Darkest Depths, The Attic, Terror of the Towers, and Altonville Mine Tours. And obviously they just completely got rid of the concept of scare zones. And last year was probably one of their worst years for Scarefest ever. They got rid of their newest maze from 2020, Freak Show Toxic Junkyard, and replaced it with a dark field audio experience called The Invitation. And when this was first announced, people thought it was going to be quite good, because obviously Darkfield are very well renowned for bringing such immersive experiences with their binaural audio attractions. But when it opened, it was absolutely rubbish. It was probably one of the worst received, if not the worst received scare attraction in Scarefest history. Obviously, over the last couple of years, people have been begging Alton Towers to just completely refresh the lineup and give us something new. Obviously, a couple of days ago, the Scarefest lineup was leaked, and it was said it was going to be the exact same lineup as last year, but Altonville Mine Tours is going to have a slightly different name, changing it to Altonville Mine Tours Tiny's Revenge, and I'm going to label it as new for this year. But obviously, today they actually announced their full lineup, and while the leaked information we got is partially true, there is actually a couple of new things that we should keep an eye on. Obviously, the main new thing is a brand new scare maze / escape room called Daz Games Panic. It is made in collaboration with a YouTuber known as Daz Black, who does all sorts of like different gaming videos and things like that. And it's sort of like it's themed to like it's set up like a artificial intelligence powered escape room. You have 7 minutes to escape, and basically just like avoid all the sort of horrors that lurk within. Now that does actually kind of sound promising, but it does sound good. And the other new thing they announced was a brand new scare zone called Burial Ground, which is going to be sort of themed to Vekoma, and I imagine it's going to be located around the area. And that is amazing, because we've not had a scare maze at Alton Towers in many, many years. But obviously that's only two new things. All the stuff from last season, even The Invitation, is returning. Now, unless that has a completely overhaul invitation with like all new special effects and whatnot, I wouldn't waste your money going in there. It's rubbish. But obviously, do I think this new announced lineup with Daz Games Panic and Burial Grounds will save Scarefest? No, I don't think that at all. I do think if Alton Towers want to save Scarefest, they still need a completely brand new lineup, not just two new attractions, but it's definitely a start. You got to start somewhere. And I do think, hopefully, this should be returning Scarefest to its former glory. Not immediately, obviously. We don't expect them to just announce like 6 new scare zones and 5 new mazes instantly. No, I think if they want to return Scarefest to its former glory, they've got to start small, and hopefully that's what they're doing now. In other news today, Six Flags Great Adventure have announced they are getting North America's first ever Vekoma Super Boomerang next season. And this is such brilliant news for the park. And I'm glad that Vekoma is starting to really pick up the pace with this sort of new model they've announced is really taking off. But if you don't know what I'm talking about, basically a Vekoma Super Boomerang is a new type of roller coaster from Dutch manufacturer Vekoma. It is a new take on their family boomerang coaster. However, it is much more thrilling. It's a more extreme layout. It's got multiple launches. It's got inversions. It's much bigger, faster, and it's basically just like a new generation version of their original Boomerang coaster. Now, the first one ever built was in China. That opened, I think it was earlier this season, and apparently it was really good. And now Six Flags Great Adventure over in New Jersey are getting one. They're theming it. They're calling it the Flash Vertical Velocity. It's obviously themed to the DC Comics, and it is going to be so amazing. The fact that they're getting this brand new ride. Obviously, it is a clone, and obviously Six Flags are notorious for building cloned attractions. However, this one looks to be a really promising attraction. I wonder how North America and American enthusiasts are going to respond to the Super Boomerang. From what I've heard, it's a really good ride experience. Obviously, I cannot wait for this brand new attraction, Flash Vertical Velocity, to open at Six Flags Great Adventure next season. Also in the news today, and this is some pretty sad news coming from Legoland Windsor, if you haven't heard, their Rapids attraction, Viking River Splash, is going to be officially closing forever on the 25th of September this year. And this is so sad news for Legoland Windsor. Obviously, it's been part of many memories, even part of my childhood memories. Like I think one of the first theme parks I visited was Legoland, and this was one of my highlights of my when in the early days before I was an enthusiast. Actually, when I used to visit Legoland when I was a little kid. And on the Viking River Splash ride, it was a lot of fun. But if you know what I'm talking about, basically Viking River Splash is a rapids ride that first opened in 2007 at Legoland Windsor in England. It is one of the main water rides at Legoland, and obviously it is one of the highlight attractions. Since it opened, it's become one of the staple attractions at Legoland Windsor. Obviously it's got such a thrilling little rapids ride. It's different than Congo River Rapids and the Rumba Rapids at Thorpe Park and Alton Towers. So obviously this one looks like is like built a completely different layer. It's built on like the side of a hill, meaning it's not because of that. It's got to be like have all the concrete foundation. It's not surrounded by shrubbery. However, what it's surrounded by is really good theming, and also completely man-made Lego structures made of millions of bricks of like different Viking theming, like dragons and whatnot. So it is a really cool attraction. However, over the last couple of years, the ride has been suffering various different technical issues, and it is been closing quite a lot. It weren't really looking great for it, which is a bit strange because it only opened back in 2007. So you'd think it would have a relatively decent sort of reputation. But obviously recently, last week, Legoland Windsor officially announced that they're going to be closing Viking River Rapids forever on the 25th of September, and we don't know what's going to happen to that site. We don't know if by the sounds of it, they're going to be completely removing it. And obviously it is quite a big plot of land. I'm not sure if they're going to replace it with anything immediately. They might just leave that whole area empty, because if it does, then you've got quite an empty land where you can. I'm not sure if they'll build anything like a new roller coaster, because they're literally building a dueling Vekoma family Boomerang right now as we speak. So I don't know. I don't think it'll be a new dark ride, because Legoland have got quite a few of them. They might replace it with another water ride. I don't know. But either way, I'm so sad to hear that a childhood classic attraction is closing forever at Legoland, and it's been really good having it with us. And obviously, I'm so glad that I was able to ride it. And finally, in the news today, Thorpe Park have officially revealed their full Fright Nights lineup for this season. And obviously it's that time of year again, like I said earlier at the start of the video. Theme parks are announcing their Halloween lineup. They're preparing for the different Halloween events. And obviously Thorpe Park, unlike Scarefest, ironically Scarefest used to be like this, but Thorpe Park, Fright Nights has become one of the top Halloween events in the UK. And it's obviously, I've only been a couple of times to Fright Nights. I've only been once in 2018, but I didn't really get to experience a lot of the stuff there because it was mainly mazes then, apart from Terror at Amity High. That was probably the only scare zone they had at that time. That and the big top Showtime, which was obviously the sort of scare zone version of a successor to the Big Top Scare Maze. And then I visited again in 2021. When they had that completely brand new lineup. It was 20 Years of Fear, and it was just amazing. Honestly, it was so good, and it was obviously a lot more enjoyable than what Scarefest has been in the past couple of years. But obviously, Fright Nights, they go all out with their lineup, and this year looks like to be no exception. Now the lineup for this year's Fright Nights looks to be a little bit smaller than last year's, because last year they had 9 scare attractions, and this year they've only got 7. Although obviously you can understand there might be a little bit of a budget cut because they're building Project Exodus as we speak, and that definitely isn't going to be cheap. I'm pretty sure it's costing like £18 million something, but it's not like way scaled down. It's still a decent lineup, and obviously the returning attractions we've got is Trailers, The Crows of Morky Meadow, Survival Games, Death's Doors, and I believe the new attractions are a new scare zone called Creature Campus Troubles Brewing, which is sort of like a successor to Amity vs. Lycanthrope Graduation Sorts, which we thought was going to be the final season of that, but I don't think that's going to be the case. A new scare and entertainment zone called Lucifer's Lair, which I assume is going to be replacing Birthday Bash, which was in that site last season, and a brand new scare maze called Stitches, which is themed like a scary different like toy emporium, which actually looks pretty interesting because I don't think I've ever seen that in Fright Nights before. And obviously that's going in the place of the terminal audio experience, which, like the Invitation, was received very poorly, if not worse. So I'm glad I'm replacing that with something new. And overall, this Fright Nights lineup looks once again brilliant, and they're already building all the attractions. Death's Doors started construction ages ago, long before that was even announced to return. So I'm glad Fright Nights is once again in for an absolute epic Halloween season, and I cannot wait to see what the event looks like this year. So that is it for this week's episode of Coast News. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you did, then please make sure to like and subscribe, and comment what you would like to see in the next video. Bye!